When I get older, losing my hair, many years from now, will you still be sending me a Valentine? Birthday greetings, bottle of wine. If I'd be out till 2:45, would you lock the door? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? You guys are good. You didn't see that coming, did you? Judah ben Tama, a rabbi in the beginning of the 2nd century CE, had left us this timeless teaching in Pirkei Avot, chapter 5. At 5 years of age, the study of Scripture, Torah. At 10, the study of Mishnah, laws. At 13, or rules. At 13, subject to the commandments, bar mitzvah. At 15, the study of Talmud. Abstract thinking is required. At 18, the bridal canopy. At 20, for pursuit of livelihood. At 30, the peak of strength. At 40, wisdom. At 50, able to give counsel or advice. At 60, old age. It continues a little. I'm going to stop it there. I love using this text when teaching about life cycle. I'm always excited to see how much this ancient take on various stages in human development aligns with our modern understanding. We begin kindergarten at 5, recognizing it's a good time to start with the kids. Our kids go to high school at 15, right? Talmud requires abstract thinking. It's really quite a remarkable text for something that's almost 2,000 years old. There are perhaps one or two small distinctions. These days, as I heard from your reaction, creating a family rarely comes before the choice of profession and the education required for it. And I certainly bristled, as apparently you did, when I saw that 60 is old age. So I did what we all do when we're puzzled. I Googled old age. You ready? Old age is the final stage of the human life course, marked by biological, cognitive, and psychosocial changes. While it's a natural part of life, there's no single universal definition, as its onset is influenced by societal factors, culture, health, and individual perception. Chronologically, it often refers to the period after 60 or 65 years. I know. But it is increasingly viewed as a diverse experience with subcategories like the young old, middle old, and oldest old, which reflect varying levels of physical activity, mental alertness, and health. So there you have it. AI seems to echo the ancient Jewish text. Or maybe it's just quoting Pirkei Avot. Sadly, AI does not give references, which is perhaps the main reason we should take these answers at the top of the search page with increased scrutiny. Anything that we're reading. Institutions are, of course, not like people, even though sometimes it may be tempting to see the parallels. Temple Manual was founded in 1962, so we have entered our 64th year. It doesn't mean we're old by any stretch of the imagination, but for a community that was started by a group of pioneers who set out to build something new and something different, it is definitely worth considering how we perceive our community now that we're about to be 64. Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? For a while, we were the scrappy new kid on the block. And that very much defined our community building efforts and the culture that has emerged. The culture of welcome. The culture of do-it-yourself. The culture in which relationships that we're able to build in this place are valued more than how fancy our communal home is. even as we have generations of volunteers who work tirelessly to make our shared space look and feel beautiful and homey, from the gorgeous gardens outside, lovingly designed and maintained by Ann Eisner and her crew, to every careful decision made by Risa and our aesthetics committee, and buildings and grounds, and so many people that work hard on all of this. Having celebrated our 60th anniversary a few years ago, we also have to consider what this maturity means. As we continue to work hard to remain the informal and welcoming, we must also ask ourselves what it means to acknowledge that TE is now also, ready for this, an institution. By sheer number of years it has been around. Our founders quite intentionally did not want TE to be an institution. Or perhaps I should say that they deliberately built this community as a startup to look as different as it could from the institutions they perceived to be outdated. A few years ago, I discovered that our original name was to be spelled without capital T and capital E, precisely to drive this message home. We may have outgrown that part of our history, but the intention behind it is still very much present in our ethos. We can settle on the young-old definition if we like, but we must still acknowledge that at 64, we're hardly a kid. A number of years ago, Gene Silk, the first president with whom I got to share this incredible partnership at TE, talked about TE as a little synagogue that could, a nod to Thomas the Tank Engine, which was very much appreciated by this British-trained rabbi, I can tell you. This cute moniker offers us a way to reconcile the fact that we are a smaller community with the fact that we are vibrant and healthy in our 7th decade of existence. How wonderful is that? Back in 2019, when we began the process of restoring our Holocaust memorial scroll, now proudly back in our ark and used at every bar and bat mitzvah that we celebrate on this bima, we discussed the possibility of using the extra Torah scroll that will come out of our ark to help support a community that could really use one of their own. Then this thing, the pandemic, happened. We were a little overwhelmed and busy with other things. Earlier this year, we received a request on behalf of a newly formed Reform congregation in Valencia, in Spain, who really wanted to be able to celebrate Shabbat and festivals by reading from a Torah scroll. The TE board unanimously supported this donation. The scroll required some restoration. We were excited to welcome the Torah scribe here at the end of April. We then honored the impact of this newly restored Torah scroll on TE history as we said our communal goodbye by reading the 10 Commandments from the scroll at our Shavuot service, before it embarked on the journey to its new home. At the time, I wrote in my shofar column that I can't think of a better way to celebrate the past and look to the future than helping a Jewish community obtain a Torah. What an honor and a blessing it was for TE to be in the position to do so. So this summer, we took the Torah to Valencia. It was a kind and generous act on behalf of Temple Emmanuel, designed to impact the community that received the Torah. I can't really describe for you the feeling in the room in that moment. I certainly don't have adequate words for the reaction of the community that received their first Torah scroll. I'm profoundly grateful to Jeffrey Levick, a TE member, who happens also to be a documentary filmmaker, who read the story in the shofar and was inspired by that story and then began documenting the process of restoration and the journey of the Torah itself. It takes a while to make such a film, and we'll have to wait. But thanks to Jeffrey, we'll be able to experience this moment together because he was able to capture so much of it. In the meantime, here's what Jeff wrote for the shofar. A sun-scorched Valencia was awaiting us when we arrived with the Torah in early July. And while the sparkling Mediterranean Sea and waving palm trees indicated that our humble home in Orange was far away, the community and the warmth of the members of Shir Hadash felt incredibly familiar. Its members welcomed us into their small space with smiles and open arms, as if we had known each other for years. It was as if somebody started playing a vinyl record in Connecticut, lifted the stylus, and then put it back down in Spain. The language barrier was real. However, when Rabbi Farbman began strumming and singing Lecha Dodi, if there was any space between our communities, it quickly evaporated. And in that moment, we were one community, sharing our customs and hymns as they have been passed on through generations. As the president of Shir Hadash tightly held the donated Torah under the chuppah the group had created with the talit, tears streamed down his cheek. From behind the camera, I too choked up, witnessing such beauty derived from such a natural act of providing this community an essential part of our tradition, end quote. We embarked on this journey on behalf of all TE members, knowing that our actions in the Torah itself will have an enormous impact on Shir Hadash. But it turns out that the impact on us has been incredible. Standing in the room full of people, watching the tears, adding our own, marking the hope and the joy of building a Jewish community, the energy was palpable. Following Shabbat lunch, a member of Shir Hadash asked Olga, "How does it feel to leave your Torah scroll behind?" So Olga paused only for a moment before responding without hesitation, "It doesn't feel like we're leaving it behind at all. On the contrary, I'm filled with deep gratitude and immense pride, knowing that we have delivered the Torah into the welcoming arms of its new, loving, and gracious home." When Torah scrolls are donated from one small community to another, it is often a sign of community declining and or disappearing altogether. This has certainly been the story of every Torah scroll that came to us, that resides in our ark. Our first Torah scroll came from Harasdevitche through Memorial Scrolls Trust, a survivor of a community that was destroyed in the Holocaust. Others came from synagogues in New York and Derby as a result of communities winding down and or merging with other synagogues. And our newest Torah scroll came to us from the estate of the former Jewish Home for the Aged, once again an organization that no longer exists. The Torahs move on to a new life, breathing life into a new community, but often when their original home is no more. But in this moment at Shir Hadash, I realized that this story that we were part of was rather different. Bringing the scroll across the ocean was not a sign of our folding, but instead a sign of our strength. Our congregation was able to support and empower a synagogue halfway across the globe, people we had never met. Imagine that. Joining Shir Hadash for a Shabbat service in July, suddenly TE did not look like a kid. Instead, it looked like a well-established Jewish community, an institution even, with its history, a building, a rabbi, a school, Torah scrolls, even specially designed mantles, and that list is pretty long. We were the grown-ups in the room, and it was truly cool to suddenly see ourselves in that way. Lindsay Sussman, who at that point was in the first week of a presidency of TE, kept asking, "Is this what TE felt like in the early days?" Now, she was asking that of me for some reason. I was not even born when TE became a proper community, hired a rabbi, and bought this property. All of this happened before I was born. I had to wait until today to tell you this. I do carry a lot of our institutional memory these days, so perhaps it was not a wrong assumption after all. But more importantly, how lucky are we that there are plenty of TE members around, including tonight, who have been here almost from the very beginning, people who can answer this question for all of us. In the midst of the celebration, a few of us were pulled aside by a member of Shir Hadash, who's a local journalist, for a few moments of reflection. The language barrier made it a little difficult to communicate for everyone but Scott. Thankfully, he was on top of it, but we managed nonetheless. They asked me to talk about this moment, about bringing the Torah. And so I shared briefly the journey and the challenges. Making it through security at JFK with the Torah in hand required 3 levels of authorization, but we succeeded. Being allowed to bring the scroll onto the plane was not an easy feat. The number of no's we heard that day. But with a little perseverance, the willingness of Iberia's staff to listen to my explanations, the letters we prepared in advance, and perhaps most importantly, the articles in Spanish press published ahead of time that I was able to pull up on my phone to accompany all of our letters. Eventually, I was ushered onto the plane and shown to the overhead compartment in first class, no less, where the Torah safely traveled while we were at the back of the plane in our seats. Just as it was supposed to be. I also acknowledge that, of course, the simplest way of delivering the Torah to Valencia would have been to pack it carefully and to ship it with a courier. But the simplest is not always the most appropriate or the most meaningful. Navigating all the challenges along the way and bringing the Torah by hand was not easy, but I cannot think of a more fitting way to bring the Torah from one community to another. As I sat in the small hot room, I proceeded to tell them that a community needs people. Without people wanting to be together and spend time together, you don't have a community. The community can exist without the building, even though having a place to call home is very, very helpful. The community can exist without the rabbi, even though having the rabbi teach and lead the community can help transform it in great many ways. Rabbi Lisitsa, my colleague, is helping Shir Hadash and supporting them from Jerusalem, where she lives. She is only able to travel to Valencia a few times a year, but her knowledge, her teaching, and her support enable this nascent community to flourish and continue to grow. The community can exist without the formal prayer book. TE had famously compiled many a loose-leaf prayer book in its early days, leading to publication first of the yellow and then the blue Seder Tfilot Emmanuel, long before we adopted Mishkan Tfilah, prayer book of our movement. These days, one can even project the words of the prayers onto the screen or a wall, as we do with visual tefillah. The presence of the well-laid-out prayer book that contains transliteration for those who are only learning their way around the service is super helpful, even if it is just a printout. But a beautiful prayer book does not make a community. All of these elements are important, and as I said, none of them are enough if you don't have people who want to come together, spend time together, pray, learn, and eat together, and make a living community. You can even make do without a Torah scroll. You can study from the book, and according to the halakha, in the absence of a Torah scroll, you can even read the weekly portion from the book, although customarily people are not called up for an aliyah in those circumstances. But when you enter the Torah scroll into a small rented room and place it into the hands of a community who are thirsting for its presence, you see the instant transformation, and it is beautiful. I was honored to stand there, to witness the tears, to add my own tears to those of others in the room, as we celebrated this powerful moment in time. It was a true blessing to get to experience this moment of joy and community, and I kept thinking of the way the Torah is at the heart of what we do here at home. How we train our young to be able to read and chant from an ancient scroll as part of their coming of age. How we take turns under the leadership of our Torah Commander-in-Chief, I believe Barbara has been promoted this year, in preparing the readings for our festivals and our Torah services. A labor of love. I think of moments like the one last week when I got to share the Torah with our kindergarten and first and second graders. They spend the year learning biblical stories and talking about Torah, so their teachers wanted me to take them on the journey into the Torah scroll. Maddie is one of the teachers. Their fascination with the scroll, their questions and excitement were just so precious. And of course, I think back, or look forward to, the Simchat Torah celebration, when we unroll the entire Torah scroll right here in this sanctuary, after we dance the 7 hakafot, the 7 circles around the room, with all of our Torah scrolls. And I think of our Torah study on Saturday mornings, engaging with ancient texts while bringing all of our understanding and life experiences to this task. In all of the other Torah learning, our adult education is reinvigorated this year, and we look forward to a great year of learning and engagement. None of this is possible without the community, which is based on people's desire to be together and be Jewish and do Jewish together. But we're not just a social club. We're a Kihila Kedosha, a holy community, because the Torah and all that it teaches us and stands for is right in the heart of our community. So we may be 64 years old, or 64 years young, or perhaps 64 years experienced. Whatever our age, may we never fail to keep Torah in the heart of our community. Shana Tova.